Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the 6-5 podcast. I'm your host today, Daniel Newman, playing the host role, joined by my always esteemed, super smart, well-dressed co-host, Mr. Patrick Moorhead. We're back in the swing of things. Last week, we both looked a little tired, but we weren't that tired. We just got a little out of practice, and now we're back, and we're back in practice. A few weeks back from the holiday, multiple shows. CES just got back from NRF, and another big week in tech. Patrick?
Great to see you. I'm all dressed up. It's Friday, 27 degrees here in Austin, but it's going to get back to 55. And yeah, I'm an old guy. I talk about the weather. So I walk to work.
Don't talk about the weather.
Yeah. No, you're right. We were a little bit off last week, and I am so caffeinated right now and kind of energetic, watching equities implode, crypto implode. Value of homes still kind of rising. I think Austin saw a 30 to 40% appreciation, and I'll just grasp onto that. No, really, the great part is that being an industry analyst, you're not tied to the stock market. You're kind of looking at the long-term view of it. And on this show, it's really about what happened during the week, why it matters, and what's going to happen in the future. Because we're tech analysts, and if you haven't tuned in before, we cover 6 topics, 5 minutes each. We talk a little bit around that. We go around 40 minutes. So I hope you like the show. And we're also going to be talking about publicly traded companies whose stocks are declining rapidly as we speak. But don't take any of this as investment advice, because this show is for informational and mostly entertainment purposes.
Hey, who's driving? You driving? I'm driving.
We go back and forth. No hard lines.
You can have the show. All right. Yeah. So thanks for throwing out that good old disclaimer, Mr. Moorhead. So we've got a nice slate of topics this week. And in fact, we've had an evolutionary slate. We're going to talk about a few things that we ended up wiping off the slate because a few things popped up. Big acquisition this week. One of the more bullish sentiment feelings that I've had, at least around Microsoft and Activision. But we also have Dell. We have Intel. We have Luminar. We have a little bit of an update on this whole FAA 5G craze. And then, of course, SAP. So let's get through these. Let's hit them all right now, Mr. Moorhead. And I'll start off here talking a little bit about the probably you could say the biggest story of the week, right? And that would be that Microsoft announced that it was going to spend $68.7 billion to acquire Activision Blizzard. This is, a mega huge gaming franchise. Pat, I'm not a super gamer by any means, but just looking at what's going on here, you're talking about an acquisition of a company that's going to give Microsoft more than 400 million monthly active users that play their games. What would you say their biggest title is, Pat?
So if I judge it based on my son, Pico, economically, it's Call of Duty.
Okay? Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Head and shoulders above on the revenue side. I mean, who doesn't appreciate the gore of war? And that's exactly what it is. And, whether it's World War II, they do futuristic war and war everywhere all day long. My son is not a huge Call of Duty player. He plays, he was ranked top 500 in Overwatch when it came out. We've attended multiple Activision Blizzard events, the two of us. World of Warcraft, huge, iconic. StarCraft. I mean, listen, it's a super interesting acquisition for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one, but it's also interesting on a few other fronts. Pat, you started off, you and I can't help but talk about the market and getting our faces ripped off. It doesn't really matter anymore whether you're a 401k holder, a crypto holder. Hopefully, if you're well diversified and something pretty long term, you're not getting too hammered. But if you're in anything risky right now, you've probably seen anywhere from a 40 to 70% pullback. Microsoft's kind of largely has been able to be steady. I mean, it's fallen maybe about 10%, which is nothing compared to most of the names right now. But making a $68.7 billion all cash deal right now when the market's pretty turbulent, not to mention buying a company that's under, I would say a little bit of scrutiny based upon a few recent culture issues that have gone within Activision Blizzard. In my opinion, showed an extraordinarily bullish move by Microsoft, which if this deal gets done, antitrust is another area to speak about. But if this deal gets done, Microsoft will become, I believe, the largest gaming company in the United States, and I think the third largest in the world, but could obviously very quickly grow and surpass the others. I think it's Tencent and Sony are 1 and 2 right now today, but they would quickly become competitive to surpass that. The cultural thing is going to be interesting. They've made a big commitment to do better. I think of Microsoft, Pat, is a company that does extraordinary diligence in any acquisition they're going to make. I just do not see them having made this if they felt that the cultural issues would not be repairable. I made those comments to a number of media sources. I stand by that. And I actually think, Pat, here's the thing on the antitrust. I just put this out there. It's not that this doesn't require some scrutiny. It does. It's too big of a deal not to look at. But it's so not the biggest fish to fry right now. The competitors in gaming, whether that be, NVIDIA and GeForce, whether that be Google and Stadia, they have big competition. Amazon, you've still got the whole Twitch world. And of course, like I said, you have Sony, you have Tencent, you have a lot of big companies that can compete in gaming. And there's still Electronic Arts and all these other companies that are out there. I just don't see it as being anti-competitive off the bat, especially if you compare it to things like the App Store, which still hasn't been dealt with. And even after the most recent ruling, got an injunction, and therefore it's business as usual for Apple. So it will get scrutinized. I see it kind of going through because also, Pat, I think it's fair to say Microsoft has largely gone under the radar on all the antitrust stuff. I don't see that changing here. Lena Khan has bigger fish to fry, said it in writing, saying it again. Don't know what you think on that.
Good take, and as usual, you're on top of all of the antitrust stuff because it's just kind of
I like that
one
stuff.
of the things that you do. You know what? I like it too. If it weren't for that it has to do with the government.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole point is I tend to like to try to think about what our government can try to not screw up, and hopefully they don't screw this up. If the big companies are no longer allowed to buy the littler companies, you've created a big rift in a massive ecosystem. That's what they're built to do. And so, yes, we need to keep it competitive. Yes, we need to regulate, but not in a lot of the ways that we're trying. Not very effective, shows a lot of disconnect. Don't want to go down that path right now because I'm going to sound bitter, and I don't mean to sound bitter. Let's talk about Dell, Pat. Let's talk about Dell Technologies.
All right. If you don't want to give me a chance to talk.
Oh, you want a chance? No. Let's go. Rock and roll.
All right, man.
All yours, buddy.
All right.
It's yours. The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So I wanted to shed a little bit of history on this because I think it's interesting. When Nadella came in, the odds-on discussion was that he was going to axe all gaming, right? If you remember, Apple came in not only dominating smartphones, but app stores and content distribution through their app store. And then there's the iPad. And if you remember, Microsoft had a bunch of missteps in smartphones. They had 2 big missteps there. Windows 8 was essentially a disaster, and Windows 8 was supposed to be the operating system that gave iOS a run for its money. Short, it didn't. It couldn't get application developers to come in and make tablet applications for Windows. So, it was all focused on enterprise. Anything that had a consumer hint to it, they were jettisoning it. Microsoft Office 365 just came on here. So the going big on gaming is a big deal. And, there haven't been rumors. I think once Microsoft found a way to make money off PaaS, gaming services, because they are the platform for multiple games out there. They kind of convinced themselves that this was it was an enterprise play, but they also then realized, hey, we might not be good at community, kind of like a Facebook and a Twitter, but we're really good at gaming community. So, I think it was an interesting move. This is an exclamation point that gaming is big and big for Microsoft. If I look at, I hate to use this term, the metaverse, I could have seen potentially a play where Apple might have wanted to buy Activision Blizzard because Apple is incredibly weak in gaming market. Their Macs don't even play the catalog of the top games out there, and Apple has an aspiration to own the metaverse. So I could have potentially seen this as a defensive move, but with that said, if the deal goes through, absolutely you're going to see these Activision titles all over the metaverse everywhere out there. My final commentary is around the strategy and the timing of Microsoft. I mean, not that I've been binge watching Succession, Daniel, but I have been binge watching Succession. And if you recall, they got a hostile takeover based on what Waystar was doing in their cruise line division, right? And a lot of it had to do with sexual issues and Activision, right? What's going on there? The executives are under fire for sexual harassment. So I think Microsoft saw that, probably talked to some of the boards of directors, right? In Succession style. And here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's real world is the big difference. But of course, that was based loosely on some things that I think some people thought might have happened. But we sure do become committed to our shows, don't we? It's
Yes.
unbelievable how that happens. All right, big topic, probably the big story of the week. But Pat, let's keep moving because that's what we do here. We do the 620, and we only have 35 minutes to get through the rest of our topics. So Dell Tech made some updates to Apex and making a big announcement of some multi-cloud related services.
Yeah, so X as a service is huge. Right, we're not in a world in public cloud only. We're in a world of hybrid and more than likely multi-cloud. And HPE got the jump on getting out there, and Dell has a much larger property X as a service called Apex. And what I mean by larger is that it not only includes enterprise and data center, but it also includes PCs. So the estate is larger. So this week, again, we don't cover the news. You can read the news, but kind of have to talk through what they did to give you context. They made four major announcements, actually six. First of all, new multi-cloud data services, new backup services, updated data storage services, and updated VMware cloud services. They also put out two new DevOps platforms with Amazon and also with SUSE Rancher. And finally, Project Alpine. And whenever you hear a project from either Dell or from VMware, it's still in the oven. It's being worked on. And they're bringing essentially their own IP on Project Alpine for block and file storage. They're bringing that IP to AWS, Azure, and GCP. You can read the details. I'm going to do a write-up. Daniel, you did a write-up. But net, for me, this is the next step. Dell Tech is playing a little bit of perceptual catch-up in relation to HPE right now. And they're prioritizing areas in their core strengths and defensive moves in storage, backup, and data protection. Compute's moving along as I would expect. DevOps to me looked better than expected. The long-term game, hybrid, multi-cloud. HPE might have gotten the first jump, but this is a decade-long transition.
Yeah, we expected Dell to step up and be a significant player here. You are right. The Green Lake move definitely was a first mover, but we've seen all the players, Cisco Plus, Lenovo TrueScale, and Dell, many of the bigger on-prem IT OEMs, all considerably participating and understanding the importance of being able to offer on-prem subscription cloud type services. It's kind of ironical, Pat, on-prem cloud. Look, they've got the right partnerships. They're, partnering with SUSE, VxRail. They're partnering with Microsoft, AKS, Google, GKE, Amazon, EKS. I love all the letters. But the point is that they are tied to all the letters and are basically building something that's going to take all these prem workloads, 70 to 80% of what's out there today, and allow companies to connect them. The services are still somewhat sparse. We've got a lot of other types of services, data services, compute services, networking services, edge services that, some of the others are already putting into market. But I think Dell is comfortable. They're comfortable that they're making strides, making steps. They're focusing on their giant customer base. They're focusing on a small number of regions where they have a lot of density and they feel they can immediately make impact. And I think we'll be getting an update in the next 6 to 12 months on how this is really going. I don't think it's going to happen immediately because this is long term. But overall, Pat, I think it's a encouraging motion for the company, and they keep pressing on. So let's get on. We made a little time up there. All right, you want to wing back here?
No. We're all good. I just wanted to show this holistically what Apex is all about and some of the updates. It's very hard for me to say in reality one vendor is ahead of the other. Therefore, I default, Daniel. I mean, I can go through and say, hey, which data storage services is more competitive across the vendors, but it's really hard holistically. And until I start seeing some monster numbers, growth numbers, right? Let's not forget AWS is growing, 50%. So is Azure. Sorry. AWS is 30%, 30%. Azure and GCP are 40, 50. Until we start seeing big numbers and growth numbers like that, it's hard for me to even say that this thing is a freight train. So sorry for the double back there.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, we're seeing big growth, but it's still growth on small numbers. And so we need those numbers to get a little bit bigger, density, more customer cases. But I think these things are going to play out, but the competition is coming from all sides. It's coming from the public clouds, and it's going to come from them. So, hey, Pat, so this morning, Mr. Pat Gelsinger jumped on to CNBC. There were some rumblings of this throughout the week, but that Intel had made the commitment to build its next sort of super leading edge fab in Ohio. So that was some really big news. I believe it's $100 billion mega fab is what they're saying. It'd be the world's largest chip plant is what Gelsinger said. I mean, obviously, Pat, let's just talk about this in the big picture. Over the last 2 years, we've heard endlessly about the supply chain shortage. Now, this was not strictly a shortage based upon failed supply chain efforts and endeavors and management and offshoring. It also had to do with unprecedented demand that was brought on by a combination of COVID and web evolution, cloud computing, futuristic vehicles that are all using more and more semiconductors. And so we say semiconductors will lead the world. This is a true story. We did not make it up. The growth is real. The PCs are still humming, mobile phones are humming, automobiles, but everything that needs chips. We saw issues on the leading and the lagging edge. And so that was one storyline. We also saw this shortage could arguably be caused by the fact that we moved from about 37% of chip production here in the United States to around 12%. As that number came to fruition, we realized that maybe we had a little bit of problem that we moved too much offshore too fast. So as everyone from the Biden administration to leaders in the semiconductor space around the world were sort of evaluating the circumstances and the situation, everyone said repatriation is going to be the key. TSM is building fabs in Arizona, as is Intel. You've got Samsung building fabs, Pat, right outside our beautiful hometown here in Austin. And now Intel is going to continue to up the ante. It's going to spend more money and build more fabs in Ohio, which is very interesting. A job creator, a hopeful improvement of resiliency in the supply chain, a big investment and expense, desire to compete. Intel's been a bit under fire as it's done a little bit more work with fabless, but also, people questioning its next technology. Will it be able to catch up on process with TSM and all of the fabless, Qualcomm, AMD, even Tesla and Apple, all of which building on fabless. And so there's a lot of statistics and numbers coming together here, but I think Intel has been very committed. Its IDF strategy, its foundry strategy, its IDM strategy, being a company that's not only designing but also manufacturing full stack has been very important to Intel and has been very important to Pat's narrative coming into market. So, I will say my immediate take is interesting destination. Want to see all the details from a standpoint of what sort of tax breaks, benefits, what was the final selection. It seems interesting that Ohio was the final selection, but it's also good to see it distributed across the U.S. because much of it has been here in the South and the Southwest, Pat. But it's good news for America.
Wow, Daniel,
only like 2 minutes.
Solid end. No, solid ending. Good for America. No, that's exciting. Listen, 2 fabs, both in Ohio, $20 billion, big investment. I grew up in Ohio, Daniel, and the region was decimated by a loss of jobs in the 70s and 80s, automotive, steel, overall manufacturing, heck, tires, right? Believe it or not, a little bit over 100 years ago, Ohio used to be the tech epicenter of the United States. Sorry, not 100 years ago. Yeah, 100 years ago. When Wright brothers, Thomas Edison, heart transplants, believe it or not, ball bearings was a huge mechanical. NCR, my first employer in Ohio, spawned Thomas Watson. In fact, the word firing comes from when Thomas Watson left NCR. They pushed his desk out the window and set it on fire for all the employees to see what happens to employees that leave NCR. But that's a long time ago. And now it is one of the fentanyl capitals of the world. Heroin addiction is high. But back to the show. I left there in 1995 and never looked back. Why? No tech jobs. I mean, the weather sucked, but no tech jobs. My biggest question here, Daniel, is how you don't just go and build a factory. Okay, this is not building a factory for the pillow guy. Okay, this requires a very high propensity of PhDs. It takes about 500 very unique suppliers that are going to have to set up shop there. The reason that people re-up in fabs in Arizona and New York and Austin is because all that stuff is set up. The ecosystem is there. There is not an ecosystem in Ohio for this. So I really want to see this. Maybe, just maybe, but the last time I did a one-on-one with Pat Gelsinger, he was in Washington, D.C. And I'm hearing Pat is spending a lot of time there. It would be interesting if you look at Ohio is typically a pivot state for the presidency. And it goes back and forth between red and blue. And the fact that Pat Gelsinger is going to go up to Washington, D.C. and do a victory lap, probably with Commerce Secretary, and maybe even Biden shows up. It's probably going to look good for the presidency as well. So maybe choosing Ohio had something to do with the politics and getting money from the U.S. government. I don't know. Is that just too conspiracy theory, Daniel?
No, I mean, I think the fact of the matter is you can't simply tell everybody it's a conspiracy theory when it's not what you want to hear. I think people tend to be pretty thoughtful about politics and where they're placing and creating jobs and where you get the most political support. Arizona is a swing state, right? Ohio is a swing state. You see states like that oftentimes being looked at for large investments because there's a little bit of a gain. And let's face it, we're always trying to make gains, whatever that is. So right now there's dollars to be had as part of that semiconductor plan. I think it was like $52 billion. The grand scheme of things, that's large and yet amazingly small for the trillions of dollars we're spending and the fact that we're so dependent on this technology. But it's good to see investment being made. It's good to see Intel continuing to make investments. Right now, like I said, as the economy is sort of in a bit of a swirl with interest rates, inflation, Pat, not to go on a little bit of a diatribe, but I'll just go down this path a little bit.
Oh, and I want to rebound on just one thing I want to add at the end.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just say this. I know this isn't a politics and economic show, but I do love this stuff. And obviously I write and talk on a lot of channels that do talk about that. But interest rate hikes are terrible for most Americans. And I think while a lot of people are sort of celebrating, trying to bring inflation down, bringing down prices of houses and cars and groceries, yes, you need that. The benefit of raising rates, compressing values of companies, and increasing people's mortgage payments. Because trust me, if you raise a mortgage payment by 1 or 2%, even if the house went down 5 or 10% in value, to do that, the payments are going to be bigger. And so, same thing on car loans going up, credit card loans going up, student loans going up. These are not things that wealthy people worry about. These are things that middle class and average earners are going to be struck by. And the prices aren't going to come down that much, and wages won't go up that much, especially if the businesses and their stock prices and their values are getting crushed by these hawkish actions by the Fed. So this isn't a magic bullet, and not getting Build Back Better passed, no more stimulus, no more free checks. I mean, we are in a bit, so these are things like this Fab, though, Pat, coming full circle, are the real shovel-ready kind of things that are going to create jobs and are going to keep the economy moving. So, well, it's not like ready to, maybe some shovel.
No. I was laughing.
Remember,
Obama did his big shovel ready, and like 20% of those projects actually happen in real life.
Yeah, it's never good.
So, I talked about the lack of experience in Ohio in chip making. Let me read Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's quote. Intel's new facilities will be transformative for our state, creating thousands of good-paying jobs in Ohio manufacturing, strategically vital semiconductors, often called chips. I love it. It's like we in Ohio don't have any idea what semiconductors are, so I have to call them chips. Anyways, I was noticing that. And it's an exclamation point on just how disconnected Ohio is from semiconductors, and puts an exclamation point on how much work Intel is going to have to do to make it a leading edge facility. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to be done. Eating those chips and dip, Pat. All right, so we got to keep moving because we got the 3 more topics. We got about 15, 20 minutes to get through them. Miraculously, we should be able to do that. We just can't because this stuff's just so darn interesting. Pat, really our friend Austin Russell and Luminar made another big announcement this week. You and I have been super on top of automotive. Cool announcement, one that we probably can get through pretty quickly, though.
Yeah, it is. So if you don't know who Luminar is, they are the leading provider of LiDAR solutions. LiDAR is essentially laser beams that work alongside of radar, which is kind of shorter range, and visual systems or cameras for safety systems and in the future self-driving cars. There was a lot of debate about LiDAR. Essentially, Elon Musk essentially saying it's a folly and he's not going to be using LiDAR. Well, when Elon said that, LiDAR was 10x more expensive than it was today, and had that big giant, looked like an old cop siren on the top of an old Chevy cop car, and you still see the big spinning globe on top today, particularly in robotaxis. But Luminar has enabled not only to reduce the cost on that by 10x, but you barely even notice that it's there. The Volvo design was the best, but I digress. Volvo did a big deal with them. They did an amazing demo at CES, which my son took a video on. You and I were both there, went viral, millions of views of the Tesla running over the fake child running across the street, occluded by a car. Now we are with Mercedes, and you can see a very smiling Austin in this picture next to the chief supply chain guy from Mercedes. They have done a deal together, and Mercedes even made an investment in the company. No details about cars. You can see between the two gentlemen, there is a car with a sheet on it, which obviously is one of the cars that that has it. One thing that I noticed, and this is a subtle thing, Daniel, I don't know if you saw this. There's no bulging sensor that you would expect to come out of the roof with LiDAR. And I don't know exactly what that means. Has Luminar and Mercedes found a way to shrink the sensor even more? Or am I just way looking too into what could be a fake development car behind them?
Yeah, so as you've seen, I believe in the Volvo XC90, that LiDAR, the LiDAR technology from Luminar, they showed it. It's on the, it's front facing, forward facing, and it's on the windshield, and it sits just below kind of where the mirror is. And it's about this, for anyone that's looking, I can't really give you, but it's about the size of maybe a small, wheat thins box or something that goes up there, right? And it's actually no longer on the roof. So that's been a big part of the whole story from Luminar, is making these things less ugly. I did see there was a humongous stock deal within this for Mercedes. By this time this morning, they're probably down on it, but these companies don't make these kinds of deals for the long term. There it is, Pat. You see, it's just a tiny little sort of on the windshield. It's gotten much better, much prettier, and it's getting much smaller. Intel is using this with Mobileye right now, as they're in the process of using and developing their own LiDAR. But Volvo's doing it, Mercedes doing it. Look, I got a research note I'm publishing this morning on it, and long and short here is that Luminar continues to be disruptive. We've seen it, Pat. We've witnessed it. We've actually been in the car and experienced it. Technology is good. It's interesting. It's disruptive, and I think they're either going to be they're going to be a much, much bigger and larger player, participating in many, many more of these large companies' future safety and L4 technologies, or they're going to end up getting acquired by a mega chip company that's going to need this technology. And if the market stays compressed, that could be an opportunity. Although, knowing Austin, I think he's got a vision to build this thing. So I don't necessarily see that happening. All right, Pat, we got to keep moving. Let's talk about, speaking of kind of big, crazy connectivity news, 5G C-band debacle. And Pat, what a freaking disaster. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to just kind of review what I've tweeted about this thing. A, did we not know the C-band was coming for how long? Okay, was this like a first we heard of it? Second of all, did we not do any research during the process of deploying these antennas in this infrastructure for this C-band deployment? Did we not consider the possible interference because of near band overlap or crossover interference that could mess with instruments in various different things, like, I don't know, jumbo jets and massive airfields all over the United States? Pat, I am freaking puzzled as to how we could be so uncoordinated here between, say, the FAA, between the FCC, between the airlines, the service providers and carriers that are deploying this thing, that it's like, oh my God, we're going to turn them on this week. We might want to think about whether there's an interference issue. I mean, couldn't they set some of this stuff up around some of this equipment and say, hey, what happened? Let's test out what sort of potential risks are. We'll have someone standing by. If there's any interference, we can shut it down instantly to make sure that everybody's safe. We will not expose passengers and the public to this thing. And then, it kind of brings me back to, you remember all these days of having to turn off our phones and then having to put it, and then eventually got to the point where it's kind of like, I don't even know why they make the announcement anymore. Nobody puts their phones in airplane mode. They don't check it. And if it was really a risk of causing some sort of instrumentation issue, it wouldn't just be like, please turn them off. It would be like, put your phones in this, steel bucket until we've taken off, and then you can come reclaim them. It's insane. It's actually insane. And so here's a couple other things that are on my mind. One is, it's amazing how nobody's willing to say anything. So you pointed out that Neville Ray, one of the leaders at T-Mobile, talked about their specific tech, and I'll leave that for you to talk about here. But I watched Hans Vestager go on CNBC, wouldn't talk about it. FCC wouldn't talk about it. The FAA, nobody has clarity. I said, where is the data on this thing? How in the world did we get this far and not have published data on the quality, the risks, the interference of this ban. And then, of course, you sold this ban. The SEC sold this ban for billions of dollars. And now they're going to tell these companies that maybe they can't use it in 50 major markets pending an investigation that you're waiting till now to do. All right, my head's going to freaking explode. I don't want to, the word I want to use with the FPAT, by the way, I can't use because we get one of those censorships on our show. I don't want to have a censorship, but I'm effing mind blown by the fact that we seem so disorganized here. And by the way, we're like a week in and it seems like everyone's flying again.
Gosh, Daniel, why are you so upset? The FAA budget's only $17.5 billion. I mean, you'd expect them to squeak by with that amount of money and figure this out. I mean, I don't know what you would expect. No, I am completely disgusted with the FAA for letting this. I'm less disgusted with the FCC, but hey, we're one big happy family. We get taxed more than we should, and we should demand that screw-ups like this get addressed. And I got to tell you, I don't know what Buttigieg is doing, or where he was spending his time, or what he was thinking. This is in his camp. The one thing I will point out is and I think that T-Mobile deserves a victory lap, right? And they deserve a victory lap because their mid-band doesn't conflict with any of this. And I give them credit for having the foresight for acquiring Sprint that had that spectrum. Neville Ray came out, and I was glad he did. Essentially, he said, hey, we use 600 megahertz, 2.5 gigahertz, not the 3.7 to 4.2 that the FAA is concerned about. And he also threw AT&T and Verizon under the bus, saying that this is their issue. So I'll give them a little bit of a victory lap on the foresight here. Maybe it was luck, maybe it was sheer brilliance. It doesn't matter. But mid-band, T-Mobile, put it all around the airports. Not an issue.
Seems like a good idea, although I sometimes do wish my T-Mobile was a little faster. I am a T-Mobile user, full disclosure, and T-Mobile is a customer, full disclosure. So I just want to say all that, but I am a pretty big time user. I do want to see everything get faster because, well, I like it fast. So Pat, last topic, exciting. By the way, sorry if I sounded pouty about all that 5G stuff. I just can't believe we can't find anyone to give us like any good insights on this. Like you had to come to the 6.5 to get the good insights. And
I want to head. Listen, I think Anshul and Will, if I can pat them on the back, I think they've done the best coverage date of anybody. Maybe Sasha Sagan from PC Mag has done a pretty good job. But I'm outraged. Especially with the tax. I think I spent most of my Christmas holiday working on tax stuff. And this is our tax dollars at work. And I want a rational explanation other than dereliction of duty. I mean, Buttigieg needs to explain himself.
I got it. Yep. Right. All right, let's move on and talk about something that's a little less tepid and a little bit more, hey, kind of more good news that no one's going to care about while the market's trying to, implode. But SAP, they've been really focused. They haven't actually come out with earnings yet, but since we're going to have so many earnings, the Germans love a good pre-earnings, and some companies do that. They kind of come out early, they get their stuff organized. And of course, when you run a massive ERP system, a little bit like Oracle that can get their earnings. I think it's like 12 days, 10 days, where most companies take at least 30. SAP gets theirs out early too. So Pat?
Yeah, so let's dive into that. There are a few countries that require interim reports. Korea and Taiwan are two countries, and EU and Germany, they don't require interim reports, but they're a little bit more open, and they're regulated to where if they've had a really good quarter, they want you to come out and say it. Very infrequently in the US do I see any more, aside from, a warning. Very rarely do we see an upside pre-announce, but we did here. And in fact, I think the most exciting part of it was cloud. Cloud revenue up 28%. And obviously, SAP doesn't necessarily stand up the biggest public cloud. In fact, it's mostly hybrid cloud, with the exception of some enterprise SaaS apps that they have, but up 28%. I mean, for a company that got zero and continues to get very little respect in the cloud, that is a big deal. SAP S/4HANA up 84%, which they're giving credit for their rise with SAP, essentially an easier way for customers to move over from standard HANA to S/4HANA. So we'll get more detail. I'm hopeful in the earnings call, but a company I haven't given a whole lot of respect to, driving increased cloud numbers.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think maybe I can take this, just briefly touch on SAP, and then maybe close up here, just kind of talking about what to expect in the week ahead as earnings start to fall. But you saw a company grow about 6%, year on year overall, total revenue close to $8 billion. You're seeing significant growth in cloud. This has been a target area for the company. Cloud is still a little bit nascent as to exactly what is cloud, but that's actually becoming more the normal than, so you'd say more the rule than the exception. The market wants to see SAP's cloud business grow. Being a legacy license-based software provider and ERP is a critical thing that runs hundreds of thousands of companies, but it's not necessarily considered sexy, cool, or fast-paced for growth. So people want to say, where's the growth going to come from? Well, for SAP, the growth is going to come from the migration to cloud, and that's encouraging to see that number continuing to go up. It should also help in time push the company's margins up. So it means not only more dollars, but more profit per dollar. And if there's any sort of leading indicator for that, look at some of the pivots from the likes of Microsoft and what they were able to do when they moved the vast majority of their licensing business to subscription and cloud business. It's just better. And most companies were willing to pay for it because they're willing to sacrifice the short-term benefit, or you could say benefit, the short-term benefit of these monthly subscription payments, as opposed to these massive one-time annual or multi-annual licensing fees. So with just a minute left, Pat, just kind of ahead, we're going to probably end up having a couple earnings paloozas over the next few weeks. Definitely next week, because we're going to start to see the whole rundown. Microsoft, Apple, AMD, Google, Alphabet, and so many more are going to start their reporting cycles in the next week. Pat, here's an interesting thing. The world is looking, the economy and the stock market definitely has a little bit of that feeling like it's going to capitulate. Truth is, about 50% of the NASDAQ right now is down by 50% from their highs. So although the fact that the indices have only fallen about 12% right now, the overall, a lot of a correction has been made for a lot of tech companies. Having said that, depending on the actions of the Fed, inflation, interest rates, and now earnings, it's going to be interesting to see if there's going to be more value compression. And when I talk about this, what I basically want to say is this, Pat: I think tech is robust. I'm not saying this is not investment advice. We made that clear from the beginning, but I actually think the numbers from tech are going to be good. First of all, it's because we're only reporting in on the kind of that first part since the Omicron downfall. I don't think the demand for cloud or semiconductors or PCs or software has gone down in any meaningful way. I don't think a small increase in interest rates is going to change that. I don't think inflation is really impacting companies' needs, which are the primary buyer. And by the way, all the people staying at home are still subscribing to all their streaming services. They're still playing games. They're watching TVs. They're playing on their mobile devices. I think tech is going to be more resilient. While everybody wants to pivot to value, I think we're going to have good results. But the thing to watch is going to be guidance. Is going to say, are any of these CEOs and these boards getting spooked by everything that's going on? And are they going to pull back on what they see happening over the next quarter or year? And I think that could be somewhat of a shocker to the system and could actually cause more selling if investors feel that these tech CEOs and leaders are not willing to kind of bang their fist on the table and say the future is bright. Having said that, even if they do come out with soft earnings, tech will prevail. I'm not saying that just because I love tech. I'm saying that because even if companies are going to look to cut costs and become more efficient, Pat, they are going to have to do it with automation, with AI, with data and analytics and services and software. That's what's going to allow them to be more efficient in running their businesses. So one way or another, tech will prevail. prevail. Put that on the bottom, ending the show here, hot and heavy.
Wow, Daniel, it's a very good ending here. The other thing
I needed
I'll add,
that. That was therapy, buddy. That was therapy.
Well, no, I know. I let you roll. I didn't take the mic away. But the other thing I'll add is that not only tech is taking over more industries. I look at .com 1.0. It was primarily things like magazine subscriptions, classified ads, bookstores, and now we're kind of in this Web 2.0 going into Web 3.0. It's other industries. It's transportation. With machine learning, it's white collar information worker jobs that, if you're an analyst, I mean, one of the best analysis tools is machine learning with an amazing algorithm. It does it in real time as well. I mean, look at manufacturing. I mean, it's being replaced with robotics, and analytics is all about tech. So I'm bullish very long term about tech. Do I think a 90 PE makes sense? Probably not. Sorry, NVIDIA. But I think it still has a lot of growth. I mean, if you look at the PEs of some of the major tech companies out there, they're not 90. Some of them are
30, 25.
Intel's at 10. I mean, it's not like these wackadoodle pricing out there. I mean, heck, even plays like SoFi, which I'm an investor in SoFi. The numbers and the pricing just absolutely make zero sense. So, good place to stop here, my friend. You want to take us out?
Absolutely. So, hey, everyone, if you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button. Join us again. Good feedback comes to me. Negatives at Patrick Moorhead. He loves to hear your complaints. So bring them hot, bring them often. But in all seriousness, really appreciate you all. More coming. Our 6.5 Summit, June 7 to 9th. We're going to get more information out on that, including some of the key speakers and CEOs that will be joining us at the summit. We will be at Mobile World Congress live and in the booth, assuming that this goes on and the show goes on and that COVID permits us to. It's been crazy. We don't know. But Pat, we are going to get on the road. But for this episode of the 6.5, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again really soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.